Well, welcome everybody to this second webinar in the Norwegian STS series. Some of you participated last time. Last time was about the context of the Norwegian STS tradition. We saw that could be useful in order to understand the concept that we are going to discuss today. So last time we discussed the context of the STS, history and the macro system. And today we are going more into depth of the concept of what we call the Norwegian STS tradition. So maybe Matthijs can, the outline of this webinar is that Johan and I will have a conceptual introduction. Hopefully we'll spend just 30 minutes on that. We will have an option, or we will also make some time on questions, if you have questions or remarks that you would like to contribute with. We will also this time have some group discussions or deliberations, as we call it, where we go into groups and discuss more in depth our experience with this or what we have learned, and we will end up with a plenary discussion at the end. So that's the outline of the webinar. Conceptual introduction. Well, first we will just have a first glance at what I might think or may think that you think of as the STS, Norwegian STS tradition. Then we will go into something that we would like to discuss as the three main themes that categorize the Norwegian STS development. Johan will say a bit more about that. And then I will present a case where we have emphasized these three themes that Johan will go through. And we will end up with what we have called a sneak peek to future conceptual development. And of course, as we said last time, originally we planned for a conference or a roundtable here in Trondheim now in September. But because of the COVID-19 situation, it was not possible to do. So we will do it in 2021. These webinars are really just appetizers for the conference in 2021. And although there is so many things we would like to present and discuss with you, it's not possible to do that. So these are just appetizers. Yeah. Okay, some concepts, some words, some tools, or whatever you would call it, into Norwegian STS traditions. I think these are concepts that you are to some extent familiar with. At least that's, I mean, we call them our heroes in the STS traditions, the heroes that we, to use a Google word, stand on the shoulders of these heroes when we work with STS. Of course, you have the industrial democracy concept developed by Einar Thorsrud and Emery also, of course, and several others. Alternatives to hierarchies by Philip Herbst. I think many would be surprised that Herbst actually worked here in Norway. He actually passed away here in Trondheim. So he lived here for many, many years and worked here at university. Democratic dialogue by Bjørn Gustavsen and colleagues, of course, has been very important for the development of the STS tradition. Local theory by Max Elden and Philip Herbst as well, but maybe most known as Max Elden's concept on acknowledging everybody's way of seeing the issues. I mean, in companies, not only the experts, but also the people who actually work with these issues. And co-generative learning introduced and presented by Morten Lewin and David Greenwood, of course, as well. But we were just mentioning.
He's with us now.
Yeah, he's with us now. Yeah. So, but these are like our Norwegian colleagues that has kind of informed our way of seeing and working with STS in Norway to some extent. Yeah. But Johan, we are actually presenting 3 different concepts today when talking about STS in Norway, how the Norwegian tradition has developed.
Yeah.
So maybe you can present that.
Yeah, and I think in order to understand and appreciate kind of the Norwegian approach, I think it's worthwhile to relate it to let's say the original template, the concepts that were inherited from the Tavistock tradition when the industrial democracy experiment started in the 60s, when Emery and his crew came to Norway by the invitation of Thorsrud and so on. And yeah, we know the rest is history, of course. But in order to looking back at it, what was made different in Norway when you contrast it with Tavistock and the Durham and so on, and we think it could be summarized in at least 3 vital points. One here is what we called from structures to processes. This is a phrase I think I found by Gustavsen somewhere, that there was a lack of a process perspective in the concepts inherited from the Tavistock. Many socio-technical perspectives and design methods could be taken over from Tavistock, but there was not much learning related to the establishment and progress of projects, that what we call a process perspective. How do you go about establishing a process? How do you get a kind of foundation for it? How do you create commitment, energy, sustained interventions, and so on? How do you solve power equations? All these kinds of issues. In the English companies and the institutional landscape of England, there was a reluctancy to commit to such research-based experiments. So, and this is Gustavsen's word again, this had to be built from scratch in Norway. The second way that demarcation went from Tavistock was the focus on participation in the fieldwork. What we could say, really bringing in an action research perspective into this. To quote Max Elden, enactment of an innovative work environment law in 1977 based on workers actively participating in studying and changing their own workplace increased the need for participatory work research techniques. We try to illustrate this with a figure on this slide, where a focus moves from not just designing the final kind of solution to let's say the organizational question by socio-technical experts from the outside and so on, but how do you actually go about how do you bring in people from the organization into co-developing this new organizational landscapes or solutions. The main ingredient in an organizational process should be experiential learning, which is done jointly by management and employees in connection with a development process around a common goal. Gustavsen again. Of course, this links to the process perspective in the first issue, but this is it's not just process. It is also something about participation, the character of participation in these research projects. So, work researchers themselves extended their concern from their original focus on implementing more democratic organizational structures, like the pretty famous semi-autonomous work groups, and also try to focus on how can we democratize the structure-giving process in organization? How can we allow for participation in the structure giving process. And then, not less important, and this was with with the Norwegian approach from the very beginning, the focus on institutional development. In some various attempts at addressing systems beyond singular organizations, seeking to analyze, understand, and develop the institutional space within which the singular organizations find themselves. This dealt with coalition building, with government and the social partners. The social partners were part of the industrial democracy experiments from the very beginning. Tripartism and industrial relations setups at various levels, at national level, at regional level, at within the companies, and also bringing in other institutions like educational institutions into the picture. So if one studies specific examples of SDS intervention in Norwegian organizations, they make much more sense if they are understood in light of how they are not just cases in their own right, but also framed and shaped by the institutions surrounding and embracing them. And in order to try to, this is complex, but Matthias, if you could take the next slide. We try to draw this as a kind of a figure. If you look at a organizational case to address.
Excuse me, Johan.
Yes.
I'm not seeing any slides at all. Is anybody else seeing slides?
Yeah.
Everybody else is seeing it, so it's something wrong with me. Sorry.
Sorry. Are there any other ones beside David Greenwood who do not see the slides now?
I see them, Mark here.
Sorry, David. I'll send you the slides later on. What this slide in the picture now shows is that embracing, or it's not just it's not exactly 7 heavens, but it's a 3-layer system of an institutional landscape that is surrounding, embracing any organizational case, and on all these, on the society level of policy making, on the level of work-life regulation, and on also in the system of the organizational internal governance systems, you have a whole set of structures and a whole and agencies that are engaging with one another and across the levels. And on the society level, you will have structures like of course, the government and the legislation and the macro agreements. On the work-life regulation level, you will have issues such as the collective bargaining setup, and you will have various types of development programs going on, etc. There are some examples in the table, and all of this creates a landscape or support mechanisms and regulative mechanisms that highly inflict and also create openings for what you can and cannot do, and how you can do it in the singular case. So this is the basic idea of how a company case is institutionally situated. And that concludes, I think, the main demarcations from the original recipe from Tavistock. And in order to illustrate it a bit more, we will try to do this with a case. Hanna.
Yeah, for the Norwegian audience, I think this case is well known, but I think and we have worked with several cases many times, but I think this case illustrates wonderfully how the institutional development is really also informing organizational design in the companies. So we make use of what we call the Poly project, a project that we carried out a few years back. The aim of this project on a higher level was really to develop a network of enterprises that were in frontline nationally and internationally to utilize, and this is a key word, to utilize the competitive advantages in organizational development processes run through labor management cooperation, but of course also under the heading of this institutional the context that Johan just presented. The Action Research Project, because Action Research, and I don't know if you had said something about that, Johan, but of course Action Research and the social technical tradition in Norway is very, very much linked together. Working with social technical systems theory in companies is done basically as action researchers, so it's very much intervene in each other. So this Action Research Project offered an arena where the union representatives and the management in the enterprises had the opportunity to practice and improve labor management cooperation on enterprise development projects. So that was, we used this system of unions and management cooperation also to be able to build good social technical organizational practices. Okay. So we conducted 6 sessions during the project period. And the project lasted for almost 2 years. And the sessions itself lasted for 2 days. So there were 6 sessions over 2 days each. The companies took turns in hosting the meetings. Usually we do, and maybe you do as well, have these meetings with companies in hotels or at the university or at somewhere else, but in a class, some kind of a classroom. We chose to do it in the companies. So this was done in order to emphasize the relationship between the company and the topics discussed at the meetings. So we try to remove the gap between the classroom and actual praxis. It's a well-known problem with an organizational learning, for example. How do you narrow down the gap between what you learn in a classroom situation and going back to your normal workday? So that was one of the reasons why we did it in the companies itself. This also gave us an opportunity to take around in the production in order to get a better understanding of the companies. And this was also very much appreciated by the companies who were eager to learn from each other. So we always spend some time in the production in these industrial companies in order to understand the work itself, to get a grip of the work itself. And many of the action researchers in the team also have an engineering degree. So that was also part of it, that we really were interested in the work processes itself, not only learning. Yeah. The subjects of the sessions were partly based on an educational plan where we had previously selected some topics that we thought would provide a good basis to discuss opportunities and challenges. Like, for example, structure. How do we structure the production process? Autonomous groups in particular, communication, coordination. How do we coordinate? STS issues that we felt were important to discuss or to introduce to these companies, to give them some concepts that they can build their understanding on. And these issues were, however, adjusted to the needs of the company from session to session. So we were trying to plan, but also to be flexible in order to what the companies really needed in order to improve their production system. It was also a point that the participants were introduced to concepts in organizational literature, including STS, in order to develop a common language on organizational development. So as you see from the model that we have put here on the foil, we had these sessions, but also between the sessions, we had something we call the work periods. That was periods where the union representatives and the managers went back to their company and worked with actual problems that was directly connected to the operations. So we wanted them to choose issues that they really had to deal with, but we wanted to deal with this as a union management issue, something that they worked with together, not only the managers, but also the union, to work with this together. So they selected one or several projects that they worked with in between these sessions. Yeah. Here, no, I'm not done yet, Matthijs. Here the companies worked individually with their development projects. We as action researchers visited the companies during these work periods. We discussed both the company's organizational development project and the labor management cooperation in itself. So how they work together, but also the project in itself. The companies had also great freedom to choose from what they wanted to take advantage of the action researchers during the work period. For example, in some of the companies, we were asked to participate in meetings and discuss specific issues with the operators, or give lectures on specific topic for employers and employees who did not participate directly in the Poly project. So in this way, we tried to make this project also try to involve the rest of the companies in the work that we did. Yeah. One example of a project that was carried out through this Poly project was here exemplified by Aker, which is a yard producing steel jackets for oil platforms or oil installations. Huge steel jackets. This is a picture of the shop steward and the main shop steward in the company. The union and the management worked together in order to develop something they called job packages. It was really to give the operator or the welder some kind of that he could pick packages to see what had to be done. So they didn't want a system where they had managers who told all the welders or the teams or the peers, because they work in pair, what to do, like micromanagement or telling them exactly what to do. They wanted to give them a package, over 2 days, this has to be done. And you can do it the way you feel that, or you think with your experience is the best way of doing it, but this is the goal, for example. So in order to give the teams more flexibility, freedom, and building autonomy into the work, the union and the management try to develop these job packages. Yeah, I cannot go more into depth into this now, but it's a very interesting case, really, in an STS sense. Okay, Matthijs, the next one. This is a picture of two of the operators from Tines Sandvik, which is making tools for industry. Sandvik is a Swedish company, but it also has a site here in Trondheim. They were working with developing further the autonomous groups. So they actually removed some of the hierarchy and made the organization extremely flat, and made some of the management responsibilities, they put that into the teams, and the teams itself don't have a manager or a leader either. They rullere, what's the English word, Johan?
They rotate.
Yeah, they rotate weekly on who is in charge or leading the team. So they have really, I think, I haven't read or I haven't seen anybody else taking the autonomous group concept to that extent, testing it to that extent as Tines Sandvik did, and they are still operating that way today in many years later. Yeah. So those were the close to STS project that they worked with, but we developed it under this umbrella of union management cooperation, how we can extend the institutional concept down to company level. Yeah.
Okay. Just a little sneak peek into what this actually means for also the conference next year. You may or may not actually remember that the team we had chosen was participation in the age of blurring organizational boundaries. And initially, actually, we chose 3 main topics for this for the conference. We wanted to say something about shifting industrial relations and the flexibilization of the workforce, for example. Something about technology, and also a little bit about the danger of technological determinism in the age of digitalization and Zuboff literature, for example. And we wanted to address the idea of the impermanent organization and the more project type of temporary organizations that are popping up all over the place. And just a little bit to highlight also how these 3 sub-themes actually relate to what Johan and Hannah just told, is that actually, and that's a little bit my personal learning experience also from the last year, is that I think the Norwegian socio-technical perspective, also maybe with a hint of Dutch STS, I hope, actually gives more an idea of what this blurring actually means. So, and I'm actually, I was quite happy to learn the past year from Johan and Hannah that this Norwegian tradition is able to connect things on the industrial relations level, the more industrial relations landscape, and organizational design and development projects, that these cannot be seen as independent from each other, which was actually, but of course may not be the case for all of you, but was for me quite an eye-opener. And this is, I think, quite important also in the light of, you can, for example, think about gig workers or new forms of work in which technology and challenges to industrial relations actually come together in this new type of work. So that is why we chose this particular theme, and I hope also that I think that the Norwegian socio-technical perspective, and then maybe combined with ingredients from the lowlands, is able to connect these more landscape characteristics and organizational design and development projects. So that was to give an impression on how the story of Johan and Hannah actually relates to the things actually we want to expand on next year, September. And so, of course, and that's also what Hannah told in the beginning, it is an appetizer. So please also come to Trondheim next year if things allow us to travel again. To delve more into detail about the interrelations and the content of these 3 sub themes actually. Okay, that being said, we wanted to have a little time also for a Q&A from you actually. So if you may have any questions on the presentation, feel free to open your microphone and
I do, Matthias.
Yes, Pierre.
Johan, you're talking about from structures to processes. I think you mean the change process or the production process?
I mean change processes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Remarks or something?
Yeah, Erik?
Yeah, I have 2 questions concerning the Palu project. I wonder what was the role the scientists played in that discussion. To me, it was an impression that it is a mix of a moderation and providing impulses and knowledge, and doing some reflection impulses. What did you what was your task? What did you do there? So
yeah.
That's the question.
Good question. Yeah, no, we were some kind of moderators when it came to the union management relationship. So, for example, one of the things we did when we visited the companies in between the sessions was to discuss with the union and the management their relationship, in what way they cooperated, in what way they could cooperate, and what was the hindrances. And so we kind of built a basis for a good fundament when it came to union management cooperation for the future. And that also, we learned also that one of the companies later had huge problems, huge issues with one of the deliveries later on. And they said that if it hadn't been for this, that they had built this basis of trust. I mean, they didn't agree on everything, but at least they had some kind of funding based on trust, that they knew that they tried to kind of find out a common solution, helped them very much in when they were struggling years later. So that was part of it. But as action researchers, our main role was really to facilitate discussions between the participants, but also to give them some theories, some concepts, to introduce some concepts for them to think with, to analyze, to use in order to analyze their own situation. But we were also facilitating group discussions between the companies, where they analyzed each other and gave each other points to work with, or they were challenging each other, for example. And what we learn is that as action researchers, as people with a degree, coming into a company saying that, well, we don't understand this, we think that this is, you're doing this wrong. Yeah, I think it's problematic for us to have a role like that in many sense. Yeah, but also because it's a bit scary. It has something to do with power dimensions here for us coming into companies, having an approach like that. But if a union leader tell another union leader that, I think you should work with that, that is, that's a huge challenge, that's a problem, it's much, much easier for them to handle. It's, of course, because you're talking to your people. Yeah. So we used a lot of time with companies discussing with each other, challenging each other, trying to analyze each other and helping each other between companies. Yeah. So to sum up, action researchers, we were giving them some concept, giving them some new ideas within how to design a good organization, but it was up to them to make the decisions and to actually implement this and work with this in the companies. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. What I'm interested in, because my question always is, with participation, bringing in people to solve their problems, it is necessary to bring conceptual and solution ideas from the outside, because otherwise they stay in their people in the company stay in their environment, and they don't see they don't get a different perspective in order to find a solution. So the question is always, what is the relation between the expertise from the outside, and how do you handle and manage that with the internal process? Yeah, it's a very good question and a very good remark. And we have also been discussing that within the Norwegian community. In what way do you really need to understand the concepts operations, the company's operations, for example? In what way should you and can you bring in new concepts to the companies? And the Norwegian STS tradition has not been an expert, we haven't taken an expert role in this, but at the same time, it has been important to bring in content and concepts in order to develop the participants. So we are not only moderating, we're not only making ready for dialogue, we are also trying to bring in new knowledge into the system. Yeah. So different kind of expertise. Of course, because we all have different theories, and yeah.
Peter, I saw Peter Oei.
Yes, I have a question. Very nice presentation. I was wondering, this is a case from 2007, so it's already 13 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And I was wondering, with regard to your methodology, what has been the progress in the last years to further develop it? And can you say something about what are then now the new bottlenecks to be successful in intervening in companies? What are the new questions, the new issues that you want to address and make your method better than it already is?
Phew. I can start with the first question. It has been a problem that we lost funding in 2010. Until 2000, before 2010, actually 2009, I think, something like that. We lost funding in programs supporting action research project like this. So after that, it has been a huge problem that we, as action researchers, haven't. I mean, we have had several projects afterwards where we used the same methodology, but it hasn't been to this extent. We're not able to do it to this extent. So we could have presented other cases that are much more up to this date, but it's not of this extent. That's the Poly project. So that's one part of your question. The other part was new. Maybe you can help, Johan.
What are the new, the hot issues or new bottlenecks and so on? I think was the question.
Digitalization, of course, and things like that.
One way of readdressing this issue of connecting the, let's say, the institutional landscape and the organizational case is also to try to bring some of the sort of import some of the solution institutional setups into them, and we haven't into the organization and to use it for more. If some of you, a lot of you were present last week when Roger Bjørnstad, the chief economist of LO, held a very nice lecture for us. And one of the things that Bjørnstad said was that once you have the institutional landscape set up, you can use it for other purposes than the original intention. In his case, the wage bargaining setup in the national landscape, it can also function as a foundation for other issues than just wage negotiation. It can be used for work environment development. It can be used for competence development and so on. And I think one of the things that we are going to develop further energy into is exactly how can we kind of import and make use of various types of, let's say, institutional setups into the organizational cases. So that will be one. But for more, I think we cannot go into all of it, but I think we will try to present a wider array of our approaches in the next year. This is a sneak peek.
Yeah. But basically, you can use this model. You can use this model in any organizational issue. I think it's a way of organizing how to work with different issues. And we have been working with many different issues with companies. For example, skill development. What kind of skills do you need in the future in new markets? We have been working with environmental issues in companies, and so there's a huge variety. But I think Marit had a question.
Yeah, well, it's not a question actually, it's more like a comment, because
maybe Marit, you can present who you are. Just say what kind of organization you come from, because that's actually very, very relevant.
Yeah. My name is Marit Heimdal, and I work for the Norwegian Association for Employers. And we funded partly the Palo project, and it's been ongoing, a lot of projects later on, but in smaller scale. As Hanne mentioned, we have, for instance, right now in Hanne's home birthplace, Rødvik, in the blue sector, doing fish. But I think also one of the great thing with the Apollo project was it resulted in a way of measure the collaboration in the companies, a kind of quest back that was developed, that's still in use, to measure the level of how the union and the management are collaborating in each company, and it's a very good tool to discuss what to work with further, what collaboration to set up, and what to stop doing. So it's giving great result, Apollo project.
Yeah, that's a good comment, Marit. It may be interesting. Maybe we should present that next year. That tool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because it's very valuable.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a final question and a remark. Thomas, you had a question, and after that, David also wanted to make a comment.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the good presentation and the interesting discussion. It's maybe more or less a comment than a question. I would like to go back to one of the first slides that Johan presented and discussion about the structure and process, which I think we maybe have dropped a little bit. And the reason for saying that is maybe there's something more to go into discussion the relationship between structure and processes. Maybe there's been too much focus on processes as such as a changing mechanism. Maybe we have to have a deeper look on how the structure, or some will call it institutions, are influencing processes and back. How processes are also changing structure. So I think in the time we are now moving, and we see that the institutions and also the structure are in really deep changes. All of the granted things we take for in the last couple of years, decades, are changing, and they're changing really fast at the moment. So I think we have more to do in that direction. I really would appreciate some more research work in that perspective. The second comment I would like to also address, and I think one of the last slides introduced that scope, and I think from my perspective and the things I'm working on with both large companies, international companies, and small companies, one of the big things is how to deal with not only digitalization but autonomy and autonomy solutions, which is a game changer in how organizations are working, because autonomy and autonomy solutions are really open the boundaries of organization. We need to see that in light of a more loose organization or more an ecosystem perspective. So that means also the perspective of the employees and employees union will be different in these types of perspective, I think. Well, that's my contribution.
Okay.
Yeah, very valuable contribution, Thomas. Thank you. David.
Hanne made a quick reference to the fact that most of the Norwegian action researchers have a first degree in engineering. And if looking at the case model, with those long periods of work inside the companies, it seems to me that it did make a significant difference that not only do you have a background in social systems and industrial relations, but actually working on the factory floor, you can actually understand something about how things work. Having collaborated for a long time with Morten Levin, whose first degree is also engineering, I learned what it was like to walk into a place with somebody who actually knew how the machines there worked, or at least what they were for, versus being an ethnographer and a social scientist without that kind of training. So I'm wondering about the training of people to do socio-technical systems work, and what you think the proper components in a training program for people like this would be.
Yeah, well, I can start, thank you very much, answering that one. I'm an associate professor at the same department as Morten worked, and I'm in charge of the subject organizational theory. And of course, I think over the years, many of the classes that we have in organizational theory has maneuvered to some extent in the wrong directions, taking in issues that I find less useful when you come back to the companies, because our students are engineering students. We are working now as part of this initiative in including much more social technical perspective in our education than we used to. So both for the first year students, but also for the master students. So, and we are beginning to kind of taking it back to where it used to be, because we find it extremely useful for designing, working with companies as an engineer to really understand the system. Yeah, that's part of the answer. But yeah.
Yeah. Maybe to add a little bit to that, and then we can go to the deliberations, also time-wise. Is that also in Nijmegen, in the Radboud University, we have an extensive master and also bachelor with a lot of socio-technical design concepts. And what I realized, the past months, is that when we think about these new types of technology and how they impact or may structure work or work design, or maybe even institutional development, I think we also need a better understanding of the nitty-gritty details maybe of these new technologies. As we also saw in the first socio-technical studies, that actually had quite a good understanding of these technological characteristics. And when I read, for example, the new book of Shoshana Zuboff, that seems to lack a little bit. So I think for our program in Nijmegen, this is a thing we should address actually, because otherwise, we may still run the risk, or that's a little bit negatively framed probably, but using concepts that are developed based on these older types of technologies, and not realizing what it means actually for newer technologies and with newer technical details, and also more complicated probably. Yeah. Sorry.
But Matthijs, can I comment on the chat now, because I see that the Peter and Pierre has an interesting thing going on that I feel it's necessary to say something about. The project was, the huge cost of the project was funded by the Norwegian research funding. But huge part of it was also paid by the companies themselves. Of course, it's extremely important that the companies themselves invest in this project. Otherwise, it's a problem that they can just withdraw out of the project when they don't have time. If they invest in the project, there is also a larger, a better possibility that they will continue doing it. But that is not the only thing. Also, the union paid for it. So the union themselves and their members paid for this. So they also invested not only by time and energy, but also money, and the members' money in this. And of course, they paid just a small share of it because it's the union, but still they paid for the project itself in order to have this.
Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you all had, nice discussions. We actually had in our group. Really enjoyed that. Let's see, we have, a little bit history repeating, only 5 minutes left for the plenary discussion officially. So feel free to leave, of course, if you have to. I think Pierre already mentioned that. But I wanted to start with hearing what actually came out of the discussions, or what the discussions were about, and maybe good to start with the first group.
Group one.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the spokesperson for group one. Yeah. We had nice discussions and presented examples from each other and stuff like that. So it was a very good discussion, but I don't think we came up with like a a huge critical remark towards this way of seeing STS. We were talking about different tools or approaches that we work with in companies, or that other people work with within companies, and how this relates to STS, for example, agile and lean and things like that, and how it really need to merge both the technical and the social system when working with companies. We were working with the difference between, or how to balance knowing the company's core operations versus being skilled at facilitating dialogue. And you know, that's, I see it on a line like this, where facilitating dialogue is here, and being, I mean, knowing the core operations of the company, like, for example, engineers was mentioned as an example here, and where should we be on that line, and how to balance that. And maybe it's time to also discuss how, you know, the importance of actually understanding the core operations. We were talking about also how history is being told and presented. You know, being in Australia, you maybe see the history of how STS has maneuvered its way through the world, different than in Norway, different than at Tavistock, different than in the Netherlands. So it's, yeah, so we were talking about that. And what more?
Group one, any additions?
Well, we also talked about the sort of larger institutional environment and the kind of impact that it has, and how it's different to try to do a socio-technical systems design in Australia or in the US, where there's no national system to back it up, versus doing it in a place like Norway or in the Mondragon cooperatives, where they have a structure that backs up doing these kinds of things.
Yeah, and of course, Marit, who represented the employer organization and HO in our group, she also, of course, made a very important remark that this cooperation between the union and the manager is also part of the main agreement. So companies, at least 50% of the companies in Norway have to relate, or have to do it in a particular way. So that's part of the story. Yeah.
Let's see, group two. I think that was the group of Johan. Not necessarily Johan has to take the lead here, but yeah.
Yes, it was the group of Johan, Mark, Martina, Sylvie, and Maria. I think I mentioned all. We also had a discussion a bit like Hannes said, that we shared cases, experiences across. Interesting stuff. Martina, for instance, is embarking on a project where they are, which is kind of cross-institutional in itself, because it includes 3 private companies, the university where she works, and a hospital, and it's a matter of trying to exploit learnings from using virtual reality technology and so on at the hospital in the manufacturing setups of the companies. Isn't that right, Martina? Yeah, and so we had a kind of let's say a very social technical discussion, because it went there and from between these types of technology setups just mentioned, and also the Mark in the group who works with IT systems, but also being related to the sitter tradition in the Netherlands, and the work psychology instruments used in that, and which is, for instance, Karasek, and Sylvie in the group who is a psychologist and who has worked with let's say the further developments beyond Karasek, which kind of standing on the same side. And also Maria brought a very interesting case to us where she's trying to study the gig economy across two very different spaces. One is the ICT software developers, and the other is food delivery service. And and all kinds of issues relating to aspects of this morning's presentation, I think, came up during the discussion. Anything you'd like to add from the group, Mark or Sylvie or anyone?
I think you perfectly summed up the discussion.
Okay,
well,
thank you.
Great to hear. Great to hear. Lastly, group 3. And Erich, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start, and feel free to join in if
Yes.
something important is missing. So I think our discussion was a bit in a similar way as the first group, because by starting from the aspect of what is the strategy aspect and what is going on with company strategies, we came to the question what the institutional background and the institutional prerequisites do on what is going on inside the companies, and what are the options and pros and cons to join in these kind of projects. I think we ended with discussing on what is the relation between the ecosystem approach from the North American STS colleagues, who are very interested in that aspect, in relation to what is the more European discussion, with a much more strong emphasis on institutional background, on different institutions to be brought into the discussions, and to which are necessary providing prerequisites for discussion, for example, on qualification. So I would say that's the basic point. So
I think
this,
no, I think Erich, this was but I also maybe what I'm thinking about it is that we also discussed the difference between Germany, the Netherlands, and Norway, and that unions, at least from a Dutch perspective, when it comes to organizational design and development projects, the unions are not that visible as apparently in Norway is the case. Although there are also, but correct me if I'm wrong, Erich, in the Dutch situation, of the German situation, there are well, let's say pre-existing institutional conditions that also can be used or are used for solving other issues, but they are a little bit different than in the Norwegian situation.
The institutional context is different, and the German discussion is much more on how can we use that more and with a more in a more creative way to support organizational changes, because the works councils are stuck in their regular tasks, and the economic background is in some cases a bit difficult, to say the least.
And I think Pierre, and that's the final thing maybe for our group, but I see people also leaving. It's time also to come to an end sometime. Pierre also added that from a cure and care context in the Netherlands, then other institutional characteristics come into perspective that are relevant for taking into account the insurance sector, for example, or other aspects that then become relevant for doing organizational change. That being said, may I give the word to Hanne for some final remarks, maybe, or?
I'm surprised.
Oh, sorry.
I don't think if we need a final remark? Yeah, maybe.
Well, I would like to thank everybody then for joining in on this this webinar, and also for joining in on the appetizers, actually, the contextual and the conceptual appetizer. I hope.
Are we having any more appetizers before the conference
main course? I cannot promise anything, but you never know. Maybe we find some motivation for some new ideas that we would like to present. Yeah, that might be.
I'd like fries with my appetizer.
Well, I'm certainly Peter is looking forward to the main course, as we hear here. We hope to see you all, of course, next year in Trondheim if the worldwide pandemic situation allows. But please, we will of course keep you updated on the website, so you can check that.
Yeah, we have a website. Yeah, we have a website. We can actually, I can write it here. It has a funny name because it's called stsroundtable2020.com. So we will put news there, and we will put more content to the agenda when we approach next fall. But it's very important for us to say that it's not fixed. So if you have issues that you would really like us to spend time on in the conference, it's still time. So you can send us cases or issues or
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well.
Thank you all then.
And see you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye. Stay safe.
You too.
You too.